Hello there, and welcome to today's sermon, where we're looking at Mark chapter 8, verses 27 to 38. I wonder whether you've ever watched the BBC programme Who Do You Think You Are? I'm happy to admit that I love it. It's a genealogy programme where they follow a celebrity's parentage, and each time it's on, it provides little windows into social history through the lives of the people who'd lived through that history and the short records that remain of them. It's often an emotional journey for the celebrity whose family they're tracing. It came to mind because of the passage that we're looking at today. The programme asks, "Who do you think you are?" But in this passage we see Jesus asking, "Who do you think I am?" At the start of our journey through Matthew's Gospel, we mentioned that the book is in two halves. The first half is continually asking the question, who is this Jesus? And halfway through, in this chapter, we have the answer. Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah. The second half of the book is going to focus on the question, what kind of Messiah will he be? So in our passage today, I think we have three key questions that Jesus poses to his disciples and to us. 1, who do you think I am? 2, what kind of Christ will I be? And 3, what are you going to do about it? If you've got a Bible handy, you might want to pause the video, read this passage, Mark 8, verses 27 to 38, and then come back and join us again. So first of all, in verses 27 to 30, I have the question, who do you think I am? That's the meat of the question, although Jesus starts by asking the disciples, who do people say that I am? And there are a range of answers. Some think he's John the Baptist, others Elijah, others one of the prophets. They don't include the Pharisees in the answer here, who had less impressive opinions. But among the general population, people were hitting the high notes of history. Elijah, one of the miracle-working prophets, or perhaps John the Baptist. Notably, these are people who either told of the forthcoming Messiah or would expressly prepare the way for the Messiah. People saw Jesus as impressive, but stopped short of the amazing truth. I wonder what people would say if you asked them today. People might say that he was a great teacher or a moral hero who was sadly crucified because people didn't like being told to love one another. I'm reminded of a quote from C.S. Lewis, who's being interviewed on BBC television, and he said, I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but don't accept his claim to be God. That's the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the kind of things that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic, on the level of a man who said he was a poached egg, or he'd be the devil of hell. And you must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronising nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He's not left that open to us. He did not intend to. People misunderstood who Jesus was then, and they still misunderstand him today, or they underestimate him. But what do the disciples say? This is what Jesus asks them in verse 29. And Peter, it's so often Peter, jumps in with both feet. You are the Messiah. What a sentence that is. We can be so familiar with the idea of Christ that sometimes we treat it almost as a surname. Alex White, Jesus Christ. But Christ is a title for Jesus, and it's the Greek form of the Hebrew word Messiah. And what a title that is. Throughout the Old Testament, there have been prophecy after prophecy which spoke in various ways of the Messiah, the anointed one of God, who would save and deliver God's people from all their enemies. There were lots of exciting prophecies about a conquering Messiah who would lay waste to the nations and make Israel top of the nations, the centre of the world. To a subjugated people under the Roman heel, that was a really attractive vision to be waiting for. And the question from the first half of the Gospel has been answered. The disciples have seen enough information to understand that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Christ. But what kind of a Christ will he be? And that's our second section, going from verses 31 to 33. Hearing their declaration, Jesus now begins to teach them something new. We've just had the first confession in this gospel of Jesus as the Christ. Now we have the first teaching in this gospel about his death. Jesus is the Christ, but what kind of Christ will he be? They expect and want the conquering Christ who will rule with a rod of iron, like the Psalms say. But this is not what Jesus has come to do at this time. What he's actually come to do is so counter to their understanding that they're left almost dumbfounded. Jesus starts to teach them that he's going to suffer, that he's going to be rejected, and that he's going to be killed, and after 3 days will rise again. He's pretty clear about it, and so Peter decides a bit of correction's in order. And I can't help raising my eyebrows as I read that Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. How can he go from one moment saying, "You're the Messiah, the very right hand of God," to then rebuking him and saying, "No, it's not going to go down like that"? Jesus may be the suffering Messiah, but we don't see the Sunday school version of gentle Jesus, meek and mild here. What a stinging rebuke he gives Peter in verse 33. "Get behind me, Satan." Wow. I can't imagine what Peter felt like hearing that. This brings us to our third part, in verses 34 to 38, where Jesus asks, what are you going to do about this? If this is true, what are you going to do about it? Jesus expands his audience in verse 34 onwards, speaking not just to his disciples, but also the crowd around him. He's not coming as king in glory right now. He's coming as a servant who will suffer. Who is with him? Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Many people have given something up for Lent, which is taking place at the moment, and that's an excellent thing to do. Although when Jesus talks about denying themselves here, it's more than that. It's all part and parcel of following the way of the cross, following the way of our Master. Does this seem like an unrealistic challenge? Some years ago, I visited Sicily when I worked with Oak Hall. I was along to speak on a trip there. And when I was there, I found out about Giuseppe Garibaldi. He was an Italian patriot, soldier, and hero figure of the 19th century. He devoted his life to the cause of uniting Italy, and his greatest victory was in 1860. In May of that year, Garibaldi had landed in Sicily with a volunteer force of just over 1,000 men. Within 2 weeks, this force had taken the city of Palermo, forcing the defeat of an army of 20,000 regular soldiers. Garibaldi had an incredibly committed volunteer army, and he would appeal for recruits in these terms: "I offer neither pay, nor quarters, nor provisions. I offer hunger, thirst, forced marches, battles, and death. Let him who loves his country with his heart, and not with his lips only, follow me." If you prefer a Christian example, there was a missionary society that wrote to David Livingstone in Africa and asked, "Have you found a good road to where you are? If so, we want to know how to send other men to join you." Livingstone wrote back, "If you have men who will come only if they know there is a good road, I don't want them. I want men who will come if there is no road at all." What good is it, Jesus says, to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? These commands of Jesus were difficult for people then, and they're difficult for us now because they are so uncompromising. They cut straight across the way that we are thought to bring up. We're brought up to think that this world works. While all humanity might say, "Win the lottery, be a success, gain the whole world," Jesus says, what good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world and yet forfeits his soul? A motto could almost be that from the last James Bond film of the 20th century: The arch-villain offers Bond the wealth of the world if Bond joins them. But Bond's family motto is, the world is not enough. And he refuses and goes on to do the right thing. We find it easiest to set our priorities if we have clear goals that we think are achievable, don't we? And I believe that Jesus expects us to be gospel Christians. That's what being a disciple really means. Focused on eternal issues, both for ourselves and for the people around us. With the comfort that we generally enjoy in this country, even in these COVID times, it is too easy to go to church on the side while basically continuing with the world's agenda. Although we admire self-sacrifice in athletes who compete for personal glory, we're less prepared to make our own self-sacrifices for Jesus' sake and for the sake of his gospel. The rigour and discipline and cost of being a Christian are in danger of fading. We tell people how easy it is to join the church and then come to church when we feel like it, get involved when we feel like it, pray when we need something, rather than praying to obey God's will. And all the time we are in danger of being seduced by this world, listening to the subtle voice that says, you don't need to make sacrifices. You don't have a particular calling. You might as well make yourself comfortable. You've earned it. The same kind of things that Peter might have been saying to Jesus. We desperately need to shout back, the world is not enough. Get behind me, Satan. Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, God's anointed one, the Saviour of the world. And Jesus is looking for the church, that is us, to fix our eyes on the next world, not on this one. On heavenly values, not earthly values. Jesus is looking for a church where every member is willing to deny themselves, to die to this world's values, and to follow Jesus in proclaiming and living the kingdom of heaven. And whether times are easy or times are hard, this is the challenge that Jesus put before his disciples, before the crowd, and before us too. If Jesus is the Christ, what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? It's a question that demands our attention and waits patiently for our answer. May God bless you in this coming week.